Hey, welcome back, guys. There's a couple comments in some of the videos looking through, and it looks like a few people are looking to get into quail, and sounds like there was a few questions. So I'm just going to start you at some of the beginning phases of what I dealt with. You can actually buy quail chicks at some of your local tractor supply stores, things like that in the spring. For one, I just opted to just get the eggs in an incubator, which has a little bit of an upfront cost, but considering that the quail are not going to brood their eggs, if you're wanting to raise any size flock, I would highly recommend that you just take and go ahead and buy you a incubator online. There's a bunch of options. You want to get the forced air with the automatic turner, so you're not having to reach into the incubator constantly changing temperature and humidity and things like that. Once you get that actually going, what I usually do is I'll do what's called a dry hatch. I don't add any excess water to the incubator. It keeps the humidity down here in this area around 25%. It's just the relative humidity of the air inside the incubator, not adding the water. I keep the temperature at 100.5 on the Fahrenheit scale. Some people suggest 99.5, some people suggest 100. I've been playing around with that. The 100.5 with a 25% humidity seems to work best for me. I was getting a lot of like curled toes and things like that, and just a really poor hatch rate at the lower temperatures. And what you got to do for the first 15 days, keep your incubator set at 100.5 Fahrenheit. Don't add any excess water, or try to keep the humidity low, around 25%, if you don't have a lot of humidity in your area. Once day 16 arrives, you want to take and drop that temperature down to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And watch your eggs as they get ready to start hatching. You'll start seeing them wobble a lot. You might see the little holes pip through there where the birds are starting to break through. At that point, you need to raise your humidity up to 70%. That keeps the membrane inside the egg from shrink wrapping the bird. And you need to go ahead and plan on days 17 through 19 being hatch days. Try to get your incubator set up where when you're putting your birds in, look at the calendar, you want it to be hatching on a day when you're off or somebody's off to watch it. While they're hatching, don't be trying to go in and help open the eggs, things. It takes as long as it takes. Some birds come right out. Some birds will sit there and they'll wobble and shake and pip and sit there and try to cut for a couple days. But once your chicks come out, you want to have some sort of a brooder set up. You can go out and buy a real expensive brooder. I just use the cardboard box. I used something that was about 2 foot wide, it was about a 2x3 wide, and it was about 3 foot tall. And then you just buy some bird netting you want to lay on top of that for when they start getting up around that 2 to 3 week old. They have a tendency to want to jump, try to fly. That bird netting just stretched across the top, keep them in the box. For your watering and things like that, you can use any kind of a food dish. Try to keep the food shallow, because they're kind of like chickens in that they're going to sit there and they're going to kick around in the food and they're going to just make a big mess. I lay a puppy pad in the bottom of that box, and you can use a chicken light, or I just went with a full spectrum LED for like wintertime plants and things, because you bring plants in the winter and stuff, and that seems to work just as well as a chicken light. But I would highly recommend when you water them, there's all kinds of different water stations, the little cups where you can, hook it to a big jug and then they tap on it. Those do not work for me. I don't know why. The birds don't want to sit in it and slosh around, and then they just empty the thing out. So what I ended up doing is just taking a lid off of a coffee jar, and then put some of them glass marbles in it, and you fill that with water. Any kind of little dog food dish or anything like that that's got some sides to it. You want to put your water in there, but you want to make sure you put glass marbles or some sort of rocks with some spaces in there so they can get to the water, but they're not actually getting in there drowning, because they're not the most coordinated or even the smartest birds. They will sit there and just drown themselves in the water. So you need to make sure that you've got something in there for them to stand on. Once you get that done, you're looking at, depending on the temperature in your area, like I hatched from summer on into late fall, but we have good weather down here where we're at. So you want to make sure that your night temperatures aren't dropping below 60 before you move them birds out. If you do move them out, you want to make sure you got some sort of a heating lamp or a heating pad or something like that. In the brood box, I just had a little heating pad that would go underneath the dog training pads. You can pick them puppy pads up pretty cheap, you know, depending on where you go. I just get them at Walmart. Some people have Costco or Sam's cards and things like that, which is pretty convenient, I guess. But you want to move them birds out about 4 to 5 weeks, you know, depending on temperature. You're going to look at them, you're going to see they go from that fluff when they're first hatched. You want to wait about, I wait 12 hours after they actually hatch out of the eggs before I even move them to the brooder. You'll see some of them are sluggish, some of them aren't moving around very good. Some of them may have curled toes and things like that. And your first incentive is going to be to go in and try to help it. The best thing you can do is just leave it in the incubator for a full 12 hours. You don't have to worry about giving them food. Don't worry about giving them water while they're in there. They'll be good for, you know, up to 36 hours. But after 12 hours, I'll move those chicks into the brood box. And again, you've got your warming pad in there. You have a light. You have your water and your feed set up. And just let them do their thing in there. As they start getting their feathers, it'll look like little white cactus pricks coming out of the bird. Eventually the feathers will open up. Once they're covered head to toe in feathers, which takes between 3 to 4 weeks usually, sometimes 5, depending on the temperatures, you can move them out. If you're not getting below 50 at night, go ahead and move them out, set a brood pad inside your nesting box for them and things like that. There's a lot of things out there saying that they don't need a nesting box, that you could just have wire all the way through the cage and different things like that. I made a nesting box for mine. They seem to prefer it. If you do where you got wire, they're going to be laying the eggs on the wire. And then depending on how many birds you have, they're not watching for them eggs. They're just going to run across and stomp the eggs through the wire and things like that. If you make a nesting box, you can put a little litter pan in there with your sand, so they got a place to do their bathing and stuff. And then you can take and put in, during the spring, I typically use the pine mulch. I have switched to straw over the wintertime. I may actually stick with that because it seems to be cheaper. It goes a lot further. And go from there. And they don't really need it, but it is nice for them to go in and kind of kick around and make a little nest area. And then you can actually see where each bird makes its own nest, and that's where it's going to lay its eggs if you can't get in here every day. If you've seen the video yesterday I put up, you're going to see that the eggs are pulled out, they clean. So I have seen videos, I've seen people pull out eggs and they're like covered in bird crap. It's because they don't keep the nesting box clean. So those birds, they prefer to have things clean. Yeah, they'll make it fine if you don't get out there and clean. But me personally, I don't want to open a nesting box and smell urine or, you know, bird crap and stuff like that. But yeah, so those are the main things to remember when you're doing the young quail, is give them 12 hours before you bring them out of the incubator. You want to make sure they have a heating pad. Make sure that the water dish has some stones in it so they don't get in there and drown. And don't put the food in there too deep because they're just going to waste it. They're going to kick it everywhere. Beyond that, once they reach, you know, 5-6 weeks, the main thing is just keep them fed. I usually feed mine in the mornings, and then in the evenings I'll take out and, you know, throw them a treat or something. One of the main things you need to look at, sorry, I'm standing in some fire ants here, give me just a second to, yep, that's the thing about Florida, is the fire ants. But once you bring them outside, for the first 8 weeks of their lives, you know, you might be trying to wonder what to feed. Well, all food is not equal when it comes to your game birds, which would be quail, turkey, you know, guinea fowl, things like that. As chicks, they need something that's got at least a 25% protein to it. You can buy that. I've been able to find it over at my local feed stores. You can find it over at a Tractor Supply store. They usually have it, the Purina brand over there. They have different brands. I usually just buy the Purina. But you want to feed that to them for the first 8 weeks. The higher protein, then you can switch to a game bird finisher if you want to. I don't buy laying, you know, feed. I haven't found one for game birds at all. People switch them to chicken laying feed. But the problem with that is then you get the reduced protein for the added calcium. All you have to do is you can go to, and you can buy Tractor Supply at a lot of different feed stores. They have calcium supplements. So what I did is I just bought the pulverized oyster shell, and then I'll take and I'll throw some of that into an actual coffee grinder and pulverize it on down further and just mix it in with the food. You know, I have the big bag. I buy it in 50-pound bags, and then I'll just crush that down, put it into the actual feeding container, shake it up good. They don't need a whole lot of calcium, just a little bit goes a long way. And a finishing protein feed is going to be around 23% protein. So don't get below that. If you do, some people will feed theirs around 20%. The problem that I've seen with that is if you're going to hatch the eggs and things like that, those eggs have to have a certain amount of protein and stuff. The bird needs a certain amount of protein to make a healthy egg. If you're going with a low protein feed, you're not supplementing it, say with soldier fly larva, which is what I use. They have all kinds of different options out there. You can buy a big bag of that for 10 bucks, and I just take a third of a cup and I'll put that out, which usually a third of a cup will go good for about 15 to 20 birds. It doesn't take a lot. They'll come out and eat that up. That gives them the extra protein they need for egg developing. So I'm trying to cover all angles of some of the questions that I've seen come up. But if you think of a question that I haven't mentioned here, definitely let me know. But yeah, I mean, quail to me, I've kept a lot of different types of animals in my life. Growing up, we had rabbits and stuff. Never did anything with chickens or anything. Chickens have just never really been something I've been interested in, honestly. But I will say, I think I might actually get a few next year. I haven't decided how I'm going to do that yet, because when it rains, I mean, we're in a flood zone here, so that might work out okay as long as I have a raised nesting box. It's the predators I'm more worried about. We got a lot of coyotes and things like that out here. That might be something I might focus on, trying to thin some of those out. But, you know, just have to wait and see how it works out. But once you get your quail to laying, you're going to read online. You're going to be like, hey, when's my quail going to start laying? And everyone will say 8 to 10 weeks. Some people say 6 to 8 weeks. That's not been my experience. My experience with the quail, they start laying anywhere between 10 to 12 weeks. So you're looking at about 3 months, 2.5 to 3 months before they start laying eggs. Now, once they start laying eggs, as long as you've got a male in there, be out checking. You distinguish the male from the female pretty quick. Males usually have kind of a rust color on their chest, depending on the particular type of quail that you have. The male, they're the only ones that's going to be calling out, making some weird noises. That's their way of crowing. The females, they don't really make a whole lot of noise, but the males, you're going to spot them pretty quick. You want to have 1 male for every 5 females. That's going to keep your breeding pretty good. You can do 4 females if you want to make sure you don't get any unfertilized eggs, but depending on the aggressiveness of the male, typically they can be a little aggressive, and you'll start seeing where they're pulling too many feathers out. Maybe your quail will start bleeding where they're pulling on the feathers too much. So try to add, you know, an extra female in there. I balance out 1 for 5, so that works out pretty good for us. You can actually keep more than just 5 to 6 quail in a pen, as long as you have those numbers balanced out. You'll notice the birds, they'll come in and they'll feed together, but once they're done feeding, they're going to separate back out to their colony. You know, the males and females for one group will go do their thing, and it's kind of interesting to see that. But yeah, the main thing is finding them feed and finding them a water station that works. I've tried some of those little cups with the little, it's got a little yellow tongue in it or whatever that you flip up and down, and it's supposed to give them water. I've not had any luck with those. I ordered them online. I might check over at some of the other places, but honestly, I mean, the pricing of that, it's actually the cheapest way that I've found is take like a country crock butter, one of those square butter containers, and just cut across the top of it, leave the lid on, and cut out 2 of the sides where the bird can get its head through, and just keep that filled with water. And that seems to work the best way, because they have a tendency, just like any bird, they're going to want to get in water and splash around, things like that. So this will keep them out, keep them from pooping in it and stuff. As far as the feed, you can use a covered dish again, you know, any kind of dish like that. That seems to work the best. You can buy the ones with the tops. I would definitely recommend something with a top, but you can buy like the feeders and things like that. They get a little pricey. You can get them, they're like $8, I think, online for a couple, and I'll show some videos of that later, I guess. But you know, honestly, the cheapest way is just use some old Tupperware or something you've got laying around. You know, anytime you buy butter or something like that, you're gonna get a free Tupperware with it. So I recommend just using those because it's cheap. You know, you've already paid for the container, so may as well just use the thing. But yeah, so I guess until I can think of some more questions to answer or something like that, you know, I'm gonna kind of end this video here. But if you got more questions about the quail, you know, definitely ask. You will need in the wintertime supplement their lighting. Anytime your lighting is going to drop below 14 hours a day, you're going to need to make sure that you have that extra lighting. Wintertime here, I think we're getting about 11 to 12 hours, maybe less than that, of daylight hours. But I went to Walmart and picked up these old, what do you call them, like landscape lights, 87 cents a piece. I'd bought some real expensive ones online. They was $20 for two, and after a few weeks, they stopped working. These 87-cent lights I bought at Walmart, they do everything I need, and the birds are laying again. So I've got 2 more colonies out there that's going to actually start laying. Probably, I think, got a couple weeks on one of them, and it's going to be about 4 or 5 weeks on that other set. So just from the hatching out that we've had, things like that. But yeah, we're finally getting our quail eggs started back up again. We got 8 yesterday, so I'm hoping to top that today. I've got about, let's see, I think I got 12 laying hens in that one box that's hatching out, or that's laying right now. So I'm hoping to get back to the egg a day. But I mean, honestly, you know, they don't always lay an egg a day. I've had some that'll lay every couple days. I had one that was laying every 3 days, and the eggs are really big, and they would be, you know, double yolk eggs and things like that. If you get those real big eggs, I wouldn't recommend trying to hatch them. I mean, there's not a lot of room in them eggs anyway when it comes to trying to you know, hatch out a quail. But you know, hey, maybe you'll have some good luck with it. I thought about throwing one in the incubator, but just from what I've been reading online, it usually doesn't end well for whatever bird's developing there. So, but hope everyone's having a great week. Weekend's coming up. Hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see everybody later.